We got an article from Eli Lake, who writes for Commentary Magazine. It's called The Railroading of Michael Flynn. Now, I think it was yesterday I played you that exchange between Jake Tapper and the trade advisor to Donald Trump, Peter Navarro. And he said, you know, what CNN ought to do is do some sort of expose, some sort of documentary on the relationship between the World Health Organization Secretary General and China. How much money has China given that guy's country, and how much influence do they have on him? You know, you guys are doing all these documentaries. This is ripe for a documentary, CNN, because I know you're listening. The Railroading of Michael Flynn. This is a very, very long piece. We can only scratch the surface. Let me just read you some of it. Talking about the meeting that Flynn had with leaders of the FBI, these FBI people. Flynn did not know that leaders of the FBI and the DOJ were out for his head. They suspected he was a Russian agent, despite the fact that a counterintelligence investigation into Flynn launched 5 months earlier by the FBI had found no evidence for such a claim. That was February. In May, the Flynn hunt resumed. Robert Mueller was named special prosecutor. After months of aggressive targeting, Mueller succeeded in getting Flynn to plead guilty to lying to the FBI, even though the actual FBI agents who interviewed Flynn assessed that he hadn't lied at all. Still later, when Flynn's lawyers sought documents that would clear him of the charge he lied, the DOJ fought to keep them secret. Again, I'm just giving you highlights. August 2016, the FBI launched this counterintelligence probe into Flynn. He had been a key member of Trump's foreign policy team 2 years after Obama humiliated him by removing him from his post as at the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. The Defense Intelligence Agency is a very important agency. It's one of our 17 now agencies. He was the head of that. That's like being the equivalent of the head of the CIA. Now, they got rid of him because they felt he was way, way too harsh on China and too soft on Russia. Lo and behold, he pops up as one of Donald Trump's key advisors. Now, let me also mention this. Let's remember when Donald Trump was putting together his team. Nobody wanted to work for him. When he was running, nobody wanted to say, I'd join your administration. And so there are a lot of people who I believe were the kinds of people that join campaigns when other people say no. I don't apply that to Finn. I don't apply that to Flynn. I do apply that to some of the people that joined the Trump campaign. The FBI and the DOJ, he writes, were spooked by Flynn's proximity to Trump. They knew Flynn had taken money from RT. That's the Russia propaganda network. And he had been seated next to Putin at a dinner in Moscow that he had been paid to attend. And so people in the Obama administration thought that he might be a Russian agent. And to them, that didn't seem far-fetched. Quote, but the anti-Flynn probe came up empty. And by January 4, 2017, as I mentioned, the case agent in charge of the probe had drafted the paperwork necessary to close the file. But at the last minute, his supervisor told him to hold off because Comey wanted to keep the case open. Comey had learned that Flynn returned a phone call from the Russian ambassador who called him. The FBI was listening in. Now, in those calls, Flynn urged Kislyak not to escalate tensions with the United States. And his request, they wrote, was consistent with him advocating for and not against the interests of the United States. Still, they pursued him. And they talk about that meeting where Biden and Rice and Yates were. And that's when Obama pulls Yates and Comey aside and says, you know, let's not give all these guys information, especially about Flynn, because Comey raised the prospect that Flynn might violate the Logan Act. The Logan Act says if you're a private person, you're not to interfere with foreign policy. It's been on the books for 220 years. Nobody has ever been successfully prosecuted under it. Yates, the deputy AG, was dubious about using this as a pretext to prosecute him. And now we know from newly released documents, 53 some odd witnesses interviewed by the Adam Schiff House Intelligence Committee, not a single one of them, whether it was Clapper or Ben Rhodes or Susan Rice, none of them said that they had any evidence whatsoever that Trump had colluded with the Russians or that Flynn had colluded with them or anybody had. Nothing. And still, they did this. Here's what Lindsey Graham said about all of this stuff.
No, not at all. I want the American people to know about Crossfire Hurricane. I supported Mueller to do his investigation without interference. I think that Crossfire Hurricane is going to be one of the most sloppy, unethical investigations in the history of the country, and I want people to know about it because I've been patiently waiting for Mueller to do his job. Horowitz issued his report, and I intend to build on Horowitz's report, and there's no reason we can't do this before the election.
Back to this article in Commentary Magazine, quote, as it happens, the FBI case manager for the Flynn investigation, his name is Joe Payenka, had indeed drafted a memo closing the Flynn investigation, but he hadn't filed it formally. Until the end of April 2020, that memo was kept from Flynn's counsel and the public. Been newly released because of the declassification done by the acting head of the National Intelligence, the acting director of National Intelligence, Richard Grinnell. Quote, that memo also reveals that the FBI agents searched multiple databases inside the intelligence community for derogatory information on Flynn and found nothing. Now, such a search is far more significant than a Google search of classified databases. This would have been a scouring of intel provided by spies and electronic eavesdropping on Russia's own intel activities, the same sources and data that informed the government's assessment of Russia's election interference, and yet they found nothing. More than a month after Flynn resigned, Comey told Congress that he thought he may have to close the investigation because he had nothing until he found out about the Flynn-Kislyak conversation, which was nothing. And they hounded this man, and now he's broke, had to sell his house, and the judge won't drop the charges even though they've been recommended to be dropped? Are you kidding me?